And tonight, the world is mourning. The daughter of the King of Rock, Lisa Marie Presley, died today after suffering cardiac arrest earlier. Her mother announced her passing.
Now we're taking a live look at the Westgate, where some are paying tribute. This is where her legendary father, Elvis, first transformed Las Vegas into the entertainment capital of the world. For decades, it was Lisa Marie's mission to make sure his legacy and mark on Las Vegas would live on.
It's devastating in the Elvis world because people always had a soft spot for Lisa Marie. It was a constant reminder of the king, if you will, when you looked at her.
A touching tribute to the King of Rock's daughter at the Graceland Wedding Chapel. Through Elvis's estate, Lisa Marie Presley and her mother, Priscilla, gave the chapel the blessing to be an official Elvis wedding venue. It's one of the many ways 54-year-old Lisa Marie Presley made her mark in the entertainment and wedding capital of the world, making sure her father's legacy endures for generations. Elvis impersonators like Brendan Paul, also the chapel owner, know it well.
I think that was very important to her, too, the legacy of a performer. So her and Priscilla both have been nothing but positive.
Historic moment.
Back in 2015, Lisa Marie helped her mother cut the ribbon at the Westgate exhibit, Graceland Presents Elvis. That's where, from 1969 to 1976, her father headlined at the then International Hotel. She spent notable times of her childhood in Vegas. In the mid-70s, a doe-eyed 5-year-old Lisa Marie asked her father to meet her future husband, Michael Jackson, when the Jackson 5 performed at the old MGM Hotel. The gifted singer headlined her own show at the House of Blues in Mandalay Bay in September 2003. Brendan remembers that night.
I thought it was fantastic. With a shadow like that of your father, I'm sure it was a lot of pressure on her. I thought she knocked it out of the park, and she was all heart.
Lisa Marie would reminisce about her father in public interviews, and most recently collaborated closely with Austin Butler, giving the blessing for Baz Luhrmann's 2022 biopic Elvis movie, featuring the legend's mark on Vegas, luring millions for decades to come to the desert oasis with the tune Viva Las Vegas.
And keeping the image of Elvis and what he did historically alive to the younger generation.
The Westgate releasing the following statement. All of us at Westgate are deeply saddened by the news of Lisa Marie Presley's tragic passing. Our thoughts and prayers go to our dear friend Priscilla and the entire Presley family.